Three clauses, no amendments.
Three clauses, no amendments. Shall the clause carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The Honourable, the Government House Leader.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Could you please call Bill 10, the Personal Property Security Act?
Bill number 10, Personal Property Security Act.
No amendments. 8 clauses.
No amendments and 8 clauses. Shall the clause carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The Honourable, the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, could you call Bill number 15, the Beneficiaries Designation Act?
Bill number 15, Beneficiaries Designation Act.
2 clauses, no amendments.
2 clauses, no amendment. Shall the clause carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The Honourable, the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could you call Bill 16, the Motor Vehicle Act?
Bill number 16, the Motor Vehicle Act.
1 clause, no amendments.
1 clause, no amendment. Shall the clause carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The Honourable, the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could you call Bill 25, the Motor Vehicle Act?
Bill number 25, the Motor Vehicle Act.
1 clause, no amendments.
1 clause, no amendment. Shall the clause carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The Honourable, the Government House Leader.
Mr. Chair, could you please call Bill 27, the Occupational Health and Safety Act?
Bill number 27, Occupational and Health and Safety Act.
7 clauses, no amendments.
Shall the clause carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The Honourable, the Government House Leader.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, could you call Bill 34, the Emergency Management Act?
Bill number 34, the Emergency Management Act.
6 clauses, no amendments.
Thank you. Shall the clause carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The Honourable, the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And could you call Bill number 40, the Labour Standards Code?
Bill number 40, the Labour Standards Code.
2 clauses and no amendments.
Thank you. Shall the clause carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The Honourable the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We should now rise and report progress.
Is it agreed? Is it agreed? Thank you. Thank you.
The report of the whole House on bills.
The chairman of the Committee of the Whole House on Bills reports that the committee has met and considered several bills and recommends them to the favorable consideration of the House, each without amendment, those being bills numbered 1, 2, 4, 6, 9, 10, 15, 16, 25, 27, 34, and 40.
Order that these bills be read a third time on a future day. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Speaker, could you call bills for second reading?
Bills for second reading.
Could you call Bill 52, the Emergency Department Accountability Act?
Bill number 52, the Emergency Department Accountability Act. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to rise in the House this afternoon to talk about the Emergency Room Accountability Act, a bill that will provide accountability to communities experiencing emergency department closures. Chronic short-term closure of emergency departments is a long-standing problem in Nova Scotia. This is a complex issue that will take time to address. This legislation enables government, district health authorities, and communities to work through practical solutions together. The introduction of this legislation will fulfill our commitment to provide ministerial accountability for emergency departments. This bill is focused on one aspect of the problem, which is information, consultation, and reporting. District health authorities are already required under existing legislation to hold public forums. The new legislation requires consultation in these forums on emergency department closures and consideration of proposed community solutions. District health authorities must report to the minister about the results of these consultations, as well as on any potential closures. This legislation puts the right information in the right hands and ensures that district health authorities and communities are involved in the process. Mr. Speaker, accountability is an important step in keeping emergency rooms open in our province. As Minister of Health in this legislature, these past weeks, I have been accountable to the people of Nova Scotia in question periods, through debates, in media scrums and interviews. And Mr. Speaker, this is the system we have, and it's a great system. This act requires further that the minister table a report for the people of Nova Scotia to see with respect to the operation of their emergency rooms throughout the province on an annual basis. Mr. Speaker, at the same time, the minister has an accountability relationship with district health authorities. This legislation is about strengthening that relationship. Mr. Speaker, all members of this House know that this is only one part of our plan to reduce wait times and improve the operation of emergency rooms throughout the province. Mr. Speaker, Dr. John Ross, a well-respected, very experienced emergency room physician, is already hard at work as our emergency room advisor on this problem. And we have other commitments that we will act upon during the course of this government's mandate. But Mr. Speaker, today is about this legislation, a bill that is brief but big in meaning. In simple terms, Mr. Speaker, the buck stops with the minister, and while the buck stops with the minister, it passes through a number of hands along the way, Mr. Speaker, including district health authorities and communities. This bill defines and strengthens the accountability relationship every step of the way. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor to stand and speak regarding Bill 52, the Emergency Department Accountability. You know, Mr. Speaker, in all honesty, I can't think of anyone aside from myself in this House than the minister herself who stood on this side of the House when she was in opposition, and I'll include the member for Sackville-Cobequid. Both of them stood here hour after hour after hour and debated and said many, many things about emergency room closures in Nova Scotia. I agree partly with the minister, Mr. Speaker, and I agree that this bill is a step forward. Accountability is necessary in this issue. Where I tend to disagree, Mr. Speaker, is the fact that this may become part of the overall solution. Mr. Speaker, we know, and we have known for years in this province, for years, that there is a problem with emergency room closures in Nova Scotia. The thousands and thousands and thousands of hours, it's true, Madam Minister, no one spoke more than you did on that very issue when you were on the side of this House. And you fervently said that something had to be done about this issue. And you were very sincere, at least I thought you were at the time, you were very sincere in your challenges to the government of the day to try and come up with a solution to emergency room closures. And I'll take you at your word that you're as sincere now as you were then in trying to find a solution to the problem with emergency room closures in this province. We know that those thousands and thousands of hours are caused because many people in this province, whether they be in North Sydney or in Glace Bay or in Digby or wherever they may be, we know that the problem is they have nowhere else to go but an emergency room because there's a lack of whether the doctors' clinics are open, whether there are doctors indeed, and that's why emergency rooms are clogged with nothing more you can say but people that actually should not be there. We know that's a major problem. There were studies that were done several years ago. The Murray report in Cape Breton identified that over 80% of the people who attended ERs in New Waterford, Glace Bay, North Sydney and Sydney probably would not be classified as emergencies. They should not be there. But they went there because there was simply nowhere else to go, nowhere for them to get medical attention at that time of the day. Usually in the evening or the early morning hours or overnight, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the fact that the minister has seen fit to include in this bill public forums. I think that's a key part of finding a solution to what's going on with this problem in this province, and I'm glad to see that there will be a proposed community solutions to all of this. I know, Mr. Speaker, that other members of my caucus want to talk on this. I'm sure the member for Dartmouth East has something to say about Dartmouth General. As a matter of fact, I can probably guarantee that. But I wanted to because as a past critic in the caucus for health for several years, it was one of the major topics that we dealt with in this legislature over at least the past 5 or 6 years, to my knowledge. And it's a problem that still exists. Dr. Ross's appointment as an emergency room, he's a specialist, and we welcome that. We understand that it's going to take time, and the minister had made reference, give us some time to try and find a solution to that problem. But I'm also aware, as many Nova Scotians are aware, and as members of the NDP caucus are aware, that the minister has the experience in this field. She was a critic of this very field and this very subject for many, many years. She knew the problem existed, and she knew going into her health portfolio that this problem was there and that it required immediate solution, Mr. Speaker. This problem does not go away. It will not go away overnight. I'm quite happy to stand here and say I agree with the minister that there is no overnight solution to the problem in ERs, but it is a problem that has been around for some time. Accountability, yes, is needed. It's always needed when we're talking about something as important as health care in this province, and a public forum is required. But I dare say, Mr. Speaker, that we can't waste too much more time on an issue like this. We need some action. We need some kind of action from the Department of Health, from the minister who admits that the buck stops with the minister, And it can go through the DHAs and it can go through the Department of Health, but ultimately the person who makes the final decision on such an important area as this in this province is the Minister of Health. And I think the Minister, I'm not trying to preach to the Minister, I know that the Minister is well aware that the buck stops with her, and she's well aware that something has to be done about this. Because as we stand here and speak, and the more time we delay, the more people are going to end up going to ERs that are not open, that are closed, more people that are not going to get the treatment that is necessary, and the more people that are going to stay home, whatever the case may be. And we know in times such as this, when we're dealing with pandemic illnesses, that ERs become even more important in this day and age. And Mr. Speaker, I again, as we move through second reading of Bill number 52 and it moves on to a stage of discussion, I encourage all members that in their area, if your area is affected by ER closures on a regular basis, as it is in my area, and I often tell the story, Mr. Speaker, that at one point in time, the Cape Breton District Health Authority actually considered putting a sign at the bottom of South Street, where Glace Bay Hospital is located, that would flash whether or not the ER was open or closed, much as you would see if you were going to try and get the Englishtown ferry on the way to Englishtown, whether or not the ferry was operating or not. And they thought that was a great idea, Mr. Speaker, and it's not bad to let people know and advertise in papers whether or not the ERs are closed. But imagine the thousands and thousands of dollars that has been spent so far telling people that their ERs are closed, whereas if a solution had been found to keep the ERs open, that money could have been used for another purpose somewhere else. It may not amount to a great deal, but I'm sure there would be at least hundreds of thousands of dollars that have been spent on just advertising by the district health authorities to tell everyone that their ER is closed and they can't go there. Mr. Speaker, again, I encourage the Minister, and I encourage her as strongly as we possibly can, to take this by the horns and treat it with the seriousness that's required right now to finally find a solution in this province, so that the people in this province are not living in a community where their ER is closed more often than it's opened. And that is the case in many, many communities in this province, Mr. Speaker. And we also learned that don't think for a minute it can't happen in Capital District, because it has happened in Capital District in the past years. And it's happening right now. So it spreads, Mr. Speaker, and it's not something that we want spreading across this province. Again, I know I'm going to be sharing my time with other members, and they have other areas to speak about. But at this point in the debate, Mr. Speaker, we will move along with second reading of Bill 52 and encourage public discussion. We encourage accountability on behalf of the Minister, but most of all, we encourage and we hope that a solution will finally be found to a problem that has been around for far too long. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The honourable member from Cape Breton North.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to rise to speak to this particular bill, as many of us have first-hand experience, but also with the Northside General Hospital and also the Harbourview Veterans Hospital in my constituency. I'm very acutely aware of some of the pressures that we've been facing, and what I can say, Mr. Speaker, is that when you look at the issues that have come forward, specifically with the emergency room at the Northside General Hospital and having to have patients diverted all the way over to Sydney, part of the challenges that we faced are ongoing, and I know in the last election it was very much at the forefront, at the doorstep in people's minds, especially with their concerns. But the one thing I do know is the level of promises and commitments that were being made by the now government, the NDP, and that they were very clear that they had a definitive plan to deal with ER closures, and people assumed that they had talked to their stakeholders, and people assumed that they had worked out some form of plan or arrangement that when they would become a government, that they would immediately implement. And what Nova Scotians have found out subsequently, and I'm sure there's candidates that ran for them that actually believed that promise as well, And now what we see is some paperwork by virtue of an act before the House with regards to accountability and with our emergency departments. However, what we haven't had yet is accountability from the government about what they said and what they promised and versus where they are with the delivery. Because I do know that it's not just the Northside General Hospital, New Waterford Consolidated, Glace Bay General, all being directed from time to time to, and on a more frequent basis, to the Cape Breton Regional Hospital. And what we also know, and the Minister referenced the consultant, the $100,000 consultant that's working part-time on a full-time, 24-hour-a-day problem. And, you know, in certain circles, Dr. Ross is referred to as Agent Orange, that he's been assigned a task to do something that really has a hidden agenda. And that agenda, by virtue of the words from Dr. Ross himself, that closures and or alternate plans would come forward. And he hasn't dismissed that. And what people are looking at with this paperwork is if you change things and have an independent person come in and recommend closures, then it gives the back door for the government to come in and basically walk away from emergency room delivery and care. And that's very disturbing when, even before officially starting his work, he's indicated one of the planks of what he would consider. And for the minister to say that that's a plan, it's an atrocious one if that's the case, because it is not meeting the needs. And I know in Cape Breton North alone, and the people that use the Northside General Hospital, a facility that was there for now over 50 years, providing excellent care, had been run at the time, because it was originally St. Elizabeth's, when it was run by the nuns of the Catholic Church, which was a phenomenally run and very excellently run facility, and then was expanded on in the 80s with much needed extra capacity. And the concern that we have now is that we have a government that has a backdoor plan to potentially close emergency rooms by virtue of just hiring someone for $100,000 2 days a week for what has been a massive political issue. What I do know is that when I ran in the by-election of 2001, I know that the candidate of the day for the New Democrats was saying that our government's plan was to close the whole hospital. And I had to fight a by-election campaign and the fact that the Tories were going to shut down the Northside General Hospital, that they were going to eliminate it totally and just use that as an excuse. Well, what I do know is post June 9th, and after going to those doorsteps, I can go back with great conviction and say that I've never misled my constituents. I never misspoke when it came to making promises I knew I couldn't could actually deliver on. And the people of Cape Breton North now are breathing a sigh of relief that they have somebody in this legislature that actually stood on conviction and stood about working through and managing the real issues rather than promising something we knew wasn't there, but working on a real plan in this province. So now we have this bill with regards to emergency rooms and accountability. But it falls far short. It's paper. And what it really is a way for the minister and the government, while I won't take away from the overall merit of the bill, it really is just another step in a process to getting to a plan she says she has, but has never been able to produce a single document other than this piece of paper, and other than writing a check for $100,000 to get a consultant in for 2 days a week. That's all we've heard of this plan, but Nova Scotians were led to believe that they immediately had worked a thorough, comprehensive plan that was going to deal effectively with ERs. So the accountability may be for emergency departments, but we have no accountability measures brought in by the minister or the government. And that is going to be the larger test, not just accountability at an ER level. It is going to be the accountability of this government to go back to Nova Scotians and actually say that they're going to do something. But I can put on the record, Mr. Speaker, if in that report from Dr. Ross, there are a series of recommendations about closing or consolidating ERs, then there was never a plan by the NDP other than a backdoor plan to try and get their way out of a problem. But I can tell them, they'll know that that's not going to wash, and let alone for us that are 21 or in the opposition ranks, we'll be able to hold our head high and deal with the issue. But it doesn't take away from the fact We have people that have no answers with their ERs right now. So with this, Mr. Speaker, comes a framework for a bill, supposedly as part of a plan that's never been, even on a piece of paper, articulated by the minister or the government, or where it came from. However, on the merit of the bill, one can't argue with it, but one can argue greatly with regards to the intentions of the government around this. And so with that, I know the people of Cape Breton North and those that utilize the Northside General Hospital are going to be watching very closely what this government's so-called plan is. And Mr. Speaker, I would like to have more confidence that the government truly did have a plan, but they don't. She says this is a next step in that plan, but can't produce a plan, can't produce any timelines, can't show any budget estimates, can't deal with the doctors' recruitment, the staffing of personnel, can't even maintain nurse practitioners in a much needed rural area that we've seen recently brought forward from the Digby area. So if you can't even deal with one health professional and show that leadership, how can Nova Scotians expect that they really have a plan when it comes to dealing with ERs throughout this province? Can't get one employee coordinated. Can't show leadership on one nurse practitioner that they would have, if it was the other way around, been crying bloody murder. But the minister has refused. And the member for Digby Annapolis knows, and he knows the local grassroots community aspect. And we could see the people that were here in the House. It's not very difficult political math to know that what we really have from a party that talks about democracy and democratic adherence, yet we had an employee who actually spoke their mind about something and then were penalized by having a contract canceled, yet the people don't have the care they need. So how can I reasonably listen to a minister here talking about ERs all over the province? How can anyone effectively believe, in essence, that they are sincere and their intentions are going to be met and they really are going to deal with a very massive, multi-million dollar issue, and what's more importantly is affecting the lives of Nova Scotians? The government has raised the bar when it comes to the fear factor with Nova Scotians, because Nova Scotians now know there isn't a plan. But there is a piece of legislation, and the merits of legislation you can't discount, but at the same time, it really is reflective and indicative of something that has been a very shortcoming of this government. However, we will support the bill going forward, and I thank the House for the time.
Thank you. The honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to make a few comments about Bill 52, which, interestingly enough, while it's titled an act to provide accountability respecting hospital emergency departments, it would probably be better off being called either the Emergency Room Reporting Act or the ER Paperwork Creation Act. The thing about this is, and I'm going to read from the act, it's an odd act, the way it's worded, in fact, Mr. Speaker, because it actually talks about reducing wait times in the preamble clauses, and it talks about overcrowding and wait times, and yet the problem, Mr. Speaker, is that the Act goes then on to address all kinds of issues about closure, but in the actual language of the Act never once talks about the issue of overcrowding beyond the preamble. And so I'm not exactly sure who wrote this Act, but the preamble and actually what's in the legal language of the Act later on don't actually match, which is very peculiar to me. Mr. Speaker, you know, as my honourable colleague from Cape Breton North suggested, it's not that what this Act is trying to do is a bad thing, because it's not. I think we all want to see accountability, but you begin this Act with two preamble clauses. And the first one says that keeping hospital emergency departments open is a responsibility of the government of Nova Scotia. All right, so that's fine. But then the second one says that when it comes to things like overcrowding and wait times, that's the responsibility of the district health authority. And so it divides the responsibility between the district health authorities and the government of Nova Scotia and by default the minister. And I have a lot of trouble with that, because if the government is truly going to take accountability, it all comes back to the minister, because the district health authorities can only operate within the budget envelope that's provided by the Minister of Health. And so I would respectfully submit that that should be changed, and that the entire element of this should be the responsibility of the government of Nova Scotia, not just one portion of it, and that if they want a second preamble that suggests that the district health authorities have a joint relationship, that's fine. But in fact, the district health authorities are not the ones that are ultimately responsible for overcrowding, because they don't control the purse strings and they don't control the regulations that they have to operate under. The Minister of Health does. And so it's actually a shift of responsibility for the issue of overcrowding. Now, nonetheless, despite the fact that the second preamble discusses overcrowding and the district health authorities, I can't find anything else in the Act. There's a page and a half to this Act. I can't find anything else in this page and a half of the Act that actually discusses reporting related to overcrowding. And I'm not sure why, because the preamble suggests that the Act is actually going to get into that issue, but it doesn't. So you have, obviously, you get past the definitions, and you have section 4, where it talks about an ongoing pattern of closure. Okay, that's really important. I agree with the government. It is important that ongoing patterns of closure be reported to the public, be reported to the minister, be reported to the House. For that reason, the public needs to know what's going on. The public needs to know what should be happening. And they talk about consultation, and they talk about the district health authority reporting for potential closure, which I think they do now. But that's fine. It's in the Act. There's nothing wrong with that. And that it goes on. And so you'd think that when you get to page 2, that what would happen is you'd have the section on overcrowding, which is referred to in the second preamble. And Mr. Speaker, this isn't something that I'm just pulling out of the blue that I think the government should put in this Act. It's the fact the government wrote it in their own preamble for the Act, yet it doesn't appear in any of the legal language. It's really peculiar. The first preamble's been dealt with, but not the second one, and I'm not sure why. Because the second page of the Act really just suggests that there'll be a report annually on closures, and that the Act will come in force when the Governor and Council orders it. So, Mr. Speaker, I would hope that, my hope is that the Minister of Health, as this goes through the process, I assume that the government is going to want to move this forward in this session of the legislature, and I would hope that the Minister of Health is prepared to bring forward some amendments to deal with the second preamble, because at the moment the Act is silent on that issue of overcrowding. And I know that the minister understands how serious the issue of overcrowding is, and it's not, the honourable colleague from Glace Bay mentioned the Dartmouth General, and it's not just the Dartmouth General. That happens to be the one that's having serious issues this week, and seems to be in a bit of a crisis situation. But there are other hospitals in Nova Scotia that are not necessarily closing, but are facing overcrowding situations. And I have no doubt that to some extent that's been going on for a few years. But the fact is it has gotten worse, and we should expect that that's going to get worse as the flu pandemic spreads across Nova Scotia. We're already seeing people turning up in emergency rooms and so forth, and that leading to some of the overcrowding. Although not all of it. I mean, not all the overcrowding can be traced back to the flu. So, Mr. Speaker, obviously the next step for this is law amendments and then committee and so forth. And so I'm hoping in that process that the Minister of Health and the government has heard my concern here, that this Act would appear to deal solely with the first preamble on closures, with no language in this Act related, other than the preamble, to deal with reporting mechanisms and reporting of the overcrowding and wait times. And so I'm hopeful that the government will bring forward some amendments as this process moves forward, and before we hit third reading, to provide similar reporting mechanisms that are provided in this Act for the closures, to also provide similar reporting mechanisms for overcrowding and the various levels of a code census, and I'm sure there's other levels in the chain throughout the process. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I eagerly look forward and hope that the Minister will bring forward such amendments for the House to consider in the coming days. Thank you.
Thank you. The honourable member from Digby Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to stand in my place and speak on Bill 52, an act to provide accountability respecting hospital emergency departments. Mr. Speaker, as you know, in this House in the past 3 weeks, I've spoke a little, especially in question period, about the problems in Digby. But I noticed today that the Minister stated that this bill would create a better relationship with the DHA and the DHAs of this province, and I'm hoping that's true, because the relationship for the last 3 weeks, what we've seen in Southwest Nova Scotia, especially in the Digby and Long Island area, the relationship didn't seem to be too strong between the Minister and the DHA of that area. It almost seemed like there was no relationship whatsoever, because that's what the people continuously told me down there, that there's something wrong. There's something wrong with the Minister of Health of this province and between the CEO of the DHA in Yarmouth, because there was didn't seem to be any communication. It seemed like the DHA in Yarmouth was doing what he felt best that he could do there in that situation that's gone on there with the nurse practitioner, and the Minister of Health seemed to be not stepping in at all to take control like the Minister is supposed to in this department. So anyway, I hope that statement she made is true, and I hope that that is in this bill. I want to speak about the Digby emergency room just for a few moments, and I want to tell you how bad a situation it is there. There's one doctor down there, Dr. Ron, we call him, and he's a wonderful man. He's been in the Digby area for the last couple of years, and I think he's come to the point in his life where he can't handle the situation in Digby anymore. I've spoke to him a few times. He can't handle it because he's all alone down there, and the people just seem to pile in the ER in Digby because they have no place to go, Mr. Speaker. When they get sick, they have no doctor. A lot of people have lost their family doctor down there. I know I have myself, and I had problems here a month or so ago. I ended up driving to Fall River to see a doctor who used to be in Digby, because he moved out of the Digby area to come to Fall River. And I had to travel over 2 hours to find a doctor after having a heart attack. So I know what the people's going through. I'm going through it with them down there. And we have a doctor that's trying to run the situation that's going on, but he is getting ready to pack up and leave. So in July, the end of July this year, he contacted me. And he said, Mr. Terrio, can you set me up a meeting with the Minister of Health of this province? So I said, I sure can. I sure can try. And so I tried to set that meeting up with the Minister of Health with him because I read the reasons he wanted to see the minister. And I sent them along to the minister's office. I don't know whether they was ever received, but I have had correspondence back here lately saying I guess they do recognize that I'm trying to get this meeting with Dr. Ron, because Dr. Ron has some great ideas. He studied that problem in Digby with the overcrowding of the emergency room, and it is overcrowded. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people down there, thousands of people without a doctor. And one of the ideas he has, I wish I had that document with me, I could table it here, and I may yet in this House before we are done. But one of the ideas was to have more nurse practitioners in the Digby area. And if we had more nurse practitioners, that it would take a lot of strain off the emergency room. You know, enough nurse practitioners there, people are telling me we may not even need an emergency room. That's what the nurse practitioners could do for that area. But here we had one nurse practitioner this past 3 weeks down there that was willing to even work more than she was supposed to, and the CEO of the DHA down there for not communicating well with the minister of this province and with the people was going to let her go because she was working too hard. Now I've been in business all my life, Mr. Speaker, but if I let the people go that always worked for me for working too hard, I'd have been out of business long ago, I think. I always rewarded the people that worked too hard for me, and still do, and always will. But it seems like in that DHA down in that area, if you work too hard, you're all done. So anyway, but this is one of Dr. Ron's recommendations, that we have more nurse practitioners to ease up the problem in the ER. So, Mr. Speaker, this bill, it's going to provide accountability respecting our emergency rooms. I hope somewhere into this bill that it creates a different atmosphere than what's in Digby. Because if we keep going on in Digby the way we're going, there's going to be big problems. There's big problems there now, but it's even going to get bigger. Because if Dr. Ron walks away from that ER in Digby, I'm scared to say what's going to happen. I'm scared to think what's going to happen. And so we need to correct this situation, and it's got to be corrected soon in this province, especially in the Digby area that I know best. So with them few words about the problems we have down there, Mr. Speaker, I hope that this bill goes through, and I hope that it's acted upon. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I'll take my seat. Thank you.
Thank you. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Argyle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and it's my pleasure to speak for a few moments on Bill 52, an act to provide accountability respecting hospital emergency departments. I want to thank the minister and her office for providing me with a small briefing and an update on this act before it came into the House. I think it's very important that we have an idea of the workings of this House. Mr. Speaker, I see a pretty hollow act sitting before us today when it comes to all the provinces. To all the provinces that have come, just say hello. All the provinces that have come from the NDP over the last number of months, years, and of course during the election. And Mr. Speaker, in the document that I've tabled on many occasions within this House of Assembly, keep emergency rooms open and reduce healthcare waits. And if I read what's in that promise that the NDP made during the election, I didn't see anywhere in there create more red tape for the DHAs. I mean, really, if we look at what's happening here, there's a reporting requirement from the DHAs, so that is more paperwork. There is another piece to continue to consult, and all DHAs that I'm aware of, the ones that I was able to work with, consulted with their communities on many topics over and over again. So I'm uncertain of what benefit will be gained by this document. All I can figure is that because there was no great ideas on how to fix the problem, after they finally got into the department and realized that what we were telling them was that this was not an easy task and that it will not happen quickly, that, well, we've got to put some kind of smokescreen in place here in order to make it look like we're doing things. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm just going to look maybe a little clause by clause and, wonder aloud of what possibly this is going to do to keep emergency rooms open. Because that's what this is about. This is keeping emergency rooms open. And so I'm going to go on a couple of the clauses and wonder aloud on some of these. Well, no, I'm not going clause by clause, but I'm going to bring a couple of these issues here and wonder aloud. I can wonder aloud on these things. I can talk to the House. I have a whole hour to talk to the House if I so well please, and I wasn't planning on it. So I've got a couple of questions that I'm going to wonder aloud, and I'm going to leave it at that. And I know the government House leader is a little worried that I might go my full hour here, but of course it's my right to do that here. So I'm just going to look at clause. I mean, there's not a lot of clauses in here, thankfully, to go for. This is again a pretty hollow bill. Where the emergency room department of a district has experienced an ongoing pattern of closure, the emergency department since the last public forum, that they've got to hold another public forum. So a requirement, of course, that they're going to have to have another public forum because the emergency room is closed. Well, I can only imagine how many public forums they're going to have in Digby, or how many public meetings are going to have in New Waterford, let's say. Or, I can go through the list of the emergency rooms that will continually, even after this NDP is long gone, that they'll continue to they'll experience problems with their emergency rooms. So, okay, they're going to have to consult. Well, I would rather the health authority and the health professionals work in the emergency room. The public knows what's going on. The second one, consultation must include consideration, blah, blah, blah. Provide alternative funding, provide alternative health services. And that one's the one that picks me even, the deepest here, which is 4.2. And really what that means is that after consulting with the community, and there really is no solution, and many of these situations are lack of a doctor, lack of professionals, and we can go on from there. Well, having a public consultation is not going to change the fact that there's no doctor. It's not going to change the fact that there's no nurse practitioner. So it's saying, well, maybe we should find some alternate health services. What that really means, Mr. Speaker, is that the emergency room will be closed permanently. And it'll be called something else. It'll be called a public health clinic or nurse practitioner clinic or, whatever. Mr. Speaker, we go again, we can just see a lot of reporting requirements on the DHA. And reporting by the DHA is one thing, and what that really creates is a dollar value. There needs to be a dollar amount set to all this reporting. Now, I don't know if the minister knows, but these districts are pretty tight with their dollar, and they work to the end, and over the last number of years have been almost bang on budget. There hasn't been a lot of dollars to spare for extra documents, extra reporting time, extra accounting, and whatever else it needs to go with what's being asked for here. So I wonder aloud whether there's been a consultation with the district to say, how much might this cost to do? And Mr. Speaker, if we move on, the number 6 is really to provide that annual report. So somebody within the department is going to have to prepare a report. Again, is going to have to print more paperwork, more work for the clerks. They're going to have to take this in and give it a number and all that stuff that happens within this legislature. But what did that do to keep the emergency room open? Nothing. That's what it did. It did nothing. So really, what I would call this act, if I was to put a name change in, maybe we'll do this in third reading or committee whole house, we just call it Blame the DHA Act. Or maybe we could call it the More Red Tape Act. What does it give? It's not fulfilling a campaign promise at all. I don't see it here. I mean, the minister is speaking aloud here, and maybe she'll address this when she sits here. And I'm going to read this. And I know I'll probably take a couple of laughs and some hollers from the NDP, but I think this is a good opportunity to read it out loud so everybody can hear it. All right, number 2. Keep emergency rooms open and reduce healthcare waits. And I'll point to you when I want you guys to laugh, okay? Because they need the direction, you know, especially the backbenchers. They seem to be muzzled an awful lot, so we just have to, we'll tell them when to laugh and when not to laugh. Too often, Nova Scotians are turned away from closed emergency rooms or forced to wait too long for the care that they need. Sounds like what's going on right now. You just can't count on Rodney McDonald's Conservatives when it comes to health care. Okay, jeers now. Oh, they're not going to jeer. That's surprising. They're not going to jeer. If anything, waits have gotten worse. Darrell Dexter and the NDP will open the hospital beds needed to ease ER overcrowding and will recruit doctors to cover hard-to-fill shifts so emergency rooms can remain open. We'll improve access to primary care. Here, I'm going to try to read this like maybe the commercial. We'll improve access to primary care by reducing paperwork for family doctors and boosting collaborative care with more nurse practitioners. Well, they already fired one of them. The NDP will reduce wait times for surgery with prehab teams and improve the focus on preventative care and disease reduction. We will make more effective use of prescription drugs. Each step in the NDP plan means more Nova Scotians can receive care when they need it rather than waiting as their health care gets worse.
They need prescriptions.
So, okay, I'm just wondering in here where it said that we need an accountability act or more red tape or blame the DHA. I don't see that in here. And maybe if I look behind where all these little check marks are, there's a whole bunch of check marks. Under 2, keep emergency rooms open and reduce care. Open hospital beds to admit patients stuck in overcrowded ERs. That's a good suggestion. And I would support that. But they're not doing that. They're creating an act to create more paperwork. Emergency Department Protection Fund to hire more doctors, keep ERs running. Great, that's a great suggestion. I'd support that. But that's not creating an act that doesn't do anything. Open Cobequid Community Health Center 24/7. And I'm very, very glad the member for Sackville Cobequid supports this one as well, including 3 additional assessment bed capacity. Provincial advisor to lead emergency care improvement. Well, there you go. That's one thing they actually did that they said they were going to do. Ministerial accountability for emergency departments. Well, you know, when the minister in her opening, I'll give a check mark because the minister in her opening remarks said the buck stops with her. The buck stops with her.
She's not giving the buck to anyone else.
But she's hoping, I'm not bitter at all. I'm glad. I'm glad they're government today. I'm glad because Nova Scotians will finally see that they have hollow promises and they haven't got a clue. That's what they're going to see. Well, they're more than risky. They're dangerous.
Downright.
But Mr. Speaker, I could go on for a long time on this one, but I see we're really getting close to the supper hour, and I need to really dig into this act. I mean, this act is so deep. It's going to take me hours and hours to review as we go forward. So I'm going to reflect on it some more and maybe come back another day. And maybe we'll talk about Agent Orange, and we'll talk about the code oranges at the ERs, and we'll talk about Dartmouth General and the problems they're had that are not addressed in any of this. So, Mr. Speaker, for the meantime, I'll adjourn debate on Bill 52.
Thank you. The motion before the House is to adjourn debate on Bill number 52. Is the House ready for the question? Question has been called. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Contrary-minded, nay. Motion carried. The Honourable the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that concludes our business for today. Tomorrow we will be doing bills for third reading, and if time allows, we will do Bill 14, 17, and 20, and 30 and 50 for second reading, Mr. Speaker. And the hours will be from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And now I wish you to now rise to meet at those hours tomorrow.
Thank you. The motion before the House is for the House to rise and meet again tomorrow at 9 a.m. Is the House ready for the question? Question has been called. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Those against, motion carried. The House stands adjourned until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. We have arrived at the moment of interruption. The late debate topic was submitted by the honourable member from Cape Breton North. Therefore, be resolved for the Premier to act and put an immediate end to all emergency room closures as per the Premier's campaign promise. Chair recognizes the honourable member for Cape Breton North.
Mr. Speaker, and I'm very pleased to rise for this debate. It's kind of ironic that it's just flowed out of the legislation we were just talking about with regards to emergency room accountability. And as I stated in my comments on that particular bill, what we haven't had is accountability from the minister or the government. And while she in her debate said the buck stops with her, what we do know, it obviously is the case because the government's not putting the bucks where they're needed to help people and spread them around in the areas that they promised they would deal with regards to ER closures. And to the point that, Mr. Speaker, we now are concerned about our ERs that have already been stressed. The government has not dealt with them. And now we have citizens that are not sure with regards to the H1N1 vaccination program and or the regular flu shots. And citizens that don't know, and I mean, sometimes the government says, well, we put it in the paper. Well, the minister and the government have to recognize there are many Nova Scotians that don't receive a paper, don't have access to newspapers, and quite frankly, there's a lot of Nova Scotians that don't have that luxury of spending those extra dollars. And so they're left to go to where they know, and because we have challenges, they look to ERs to try and deal with these things. And now they're hearing from their friends and their neighbours and in media reports elsewhere that there's further concerns. So there's another problem we're going to have with our ERs, and that is where we're seeing a very large concern about the delay in getting vaccinations out for H1N1 and the fact that doctors are not getting. They're being told by the minister's office they cannot get the regular flu shot provided to them. They're making requests, and those doctors have to put up a roulette wheel and spin it to see which patient deserves it or not. And they're being told the supply is limited, and which is very concerning. So they can't get it at their doctor's office, so then where do they go? Well, the only place they otherwise know is to go to an ER, because the government has not had a proper schedule, has not dealt with our emergency rooms properly. And here we have in the Cape Breton District Health Authority, number 8. I know, as I've spoken about the Northside General Hospital and the concerns about the emergency room there. And I dealt with an election campaign, an NDP candidate that was constantly going on about their plan, the NDP plan, with regards to emergency room closures. And, Mr. Speaker, we now know that that was not even a sincere promise, because there is no plan. There hasn't been one piece of paper other than a platform document that said that they had a plan, and we assumed it was well thought out. And in fact, the only thing that was well thought out was a political strategy rather than a people strategy to deal with their health care needs. And so the spin doctors within the NDP camp were effective, and I guess we have to give them that, because they were able to entice Nova Scotians to give their brand of politics a try. Well, their brand of politics is searing the backsides of most Nova Scotians, because they're getting turned away from the ER rooms. They're getting no proper attention from the minister and her department, that her ability to deal with this effectively is really not. So the buck might have stopped with her, Mr. Speaker, but again, the real impact is the fact that the government is bucking Nova Scotians on a very important matter, and that's the ERs. And when they had a choice, as was stated, to do something constructive to help the people that are in providing health services, they take away a nurse practitioner that could have been providing vaccinations because she was a capable, competent person, but they eliminate that. And then in the House, the minister then gets up and states, well, here's the schedule, which 5, 6, 7 weeks away for people that are looking for vaccinations now, that are looking for a government that should have clarity. So they had no plan with regards to ERs. They have no plan other than what is being cobbled together with regards to a proper management of a very serious matter that's concerning Nova Scotians. They're going to be turning, when they've been turned away from these clinics, they'll be turning to their doctors who have been restricted supply of vaccinations for the regular flu as well as for their H1N1. So then where they go, again, as I stated before, they will go to the ER rooms that are already stressed and or closed and send them someplace else. There is no plan to effectively deliver to Nova Scotians that are most in need. Nova Scotians, and I know in my own case, if you're at the Northside General Hospital and the ER is shut down there, you have to go to the regional hospital. Unless you have transportation, and many people don't, seniors and low-income households or persons that don't have that, well, I can tell the minister doesn't appreciate the fact that it's at least a $25 plus cab ride each way to get to that hospital for the ER. And then they're afraid to pick up the phone and call for emergency assistance because if they call 911, they're panicked that they're going to get a bill for an ambulance ride if it's deemed it wasn't really an emergency, even though they needed health care. That's what we're up against, and that's what we had with the New Democrats that got up and said they had a plan, and all they've done is purposely turn their backs on Nova Scotians for crass political purposes to get their ranks over there from 31, 32 seats. Well, they have them now, but what they have failed to recognize is that they have to go to the doorsteps that I had to go to and try to convince people there was something sincere in their platform. And they know it from the coffee shops. They know it from the corridors of the community halls. They know it that the sound is resonating rather hollow in the emergency rooms and the hospitals in their regions. And they know that they wanted and were willing to get power at any cost. And we now see they're willing to do anything with power at any cost to Nova Scotians. And that is just not right. It is not right. It is not fair. But the day of reckoning will come for the now government. Their majority will quickly be emaciated when they find that Nova Scotians do and are capable of recognizing when a promise has been made and when a promise has not been kept. And the New Democrats are finding it not just on health care but other things. So they've disappointed people with their ERs. They have no ability to properly fund. They pass the buck to DHA. So a leadership issue comes up. The minister says the buck stops with her, where she keeps the buck, blames the DHA. We see it with the government when they can't even do gas regulation. We'll put that to the UARB. They move everything out to some other outside agency. If it's tough or contentious, find a way to get the back door open and get it off our desk so we can blame someone else. They're doing it with their outside consultants. They're spending money. Drunken sailors couldn't spend money the way they've been spending it on consultants to give them advice that they only turn around and then don't take it anyway, and then add hundreds of millions of dollars on the backs of Nova Scotians for the debt burden of this province. And then when they were supposed to be responsible, they've eliminated the provisions even in the Financial Measures Act to deal with recognizing and paying off the deficits they accumulate. So what we do know is that they've been prepared to spend recklessly for hundreds of millions of dollars, yet are not prepared to invest in people and or the supplies they need and the supports they need. And that's why we're here again talking about ER closures. And you know, since they've come to government, almost 6 months now, Mr. Speaker, almost 6 months of having a plan that they said they have, and then turns out they have nothing. The minister, the premier, the cabinet, not a single member of that government can produce a single sheet of paper to articulate what the NDP plan is for ERs. They have not been able to do one single thing, but they're trying to do management but basically by the day, by the hour, by the minute, and what they're finding is they're making some quick decisions. They're trying to say, well, we'll put some legislation for it. That'll give us some cover, and that'll keep people busy. But all they're doing is putting legislation in that gives more pressure to administrators to follow up on, but does nothing for the front lines, does nothing to keep our ERs open. They haven't dealt with the doctor recruitment, the professionals. When they have an ability to do and provide leadership, they walked away from that. And that is with the most recent nurse practitioner. So if you can't show leadership for one single position, and a community comes all the way, 70 of them come to this legislative building from down in Digby County and come here with the member for the area and say, we are saying to the minister, we want you to be involved. We want you to use your executive authority to do something for the people. And she won't do that. If she can't even make one human resource decision, and that's to tell a DHA to stop playing petty politics with people in their community when they have a need and a person capable of doing it, but because they disagree with a person's personal opinion on something, I guess speaking out is not what's allowed. And we know that from the government side because their members aren't allowed to speak out. We've known about the muzzles that have been put on. If it doesn't come from Chairman Dexter and the head of the socialist regime, then nothing can be said or done. We know that. And the member for Queens, who I'm assuming, because her podium's out, must be going to speak next, she's going to probably tell us how she campaigned to tell people they had a plan for ERs, yet they have no plan. And maybe the minister gave her a piece of paper with a plan, and I'd be happy to hear from the member of Queens to present to us how it is. Because I know one thing. I will gladly go to any door in Cape Breton North and defend our past record, because it's now up to the member for Queens and her government to start determining what their record is, other than the broken one we've heard so far.
Thank you. Chair recognizes the honourable member for Queens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to rise in my place to speak to this very important resolution on emergency department closures all across this province. And I'm pleased to stand here and also give kudos to our health minister on this side of the House, who has been working for the past 4 to 5 months on ensuring that the problems faced by ERs across this province will indeed have some resolution over the next couple of years. You know, we all recognize on this side of the House that this has been a long-standing problem in our ERs, and it just hasn't happened overnight. You know, these problems with ER closures within our healthcare system here in the province, they have been long-standing problems and certainly have been developing over the past decade or more. We know on this side of the House that it will take time to address these problems, and we have started. And our Minister of Health on this side of the House has wasted no time in putting together plans and finding solutions to keeping ERs open and keeping our commitment as government. The previous government only acted on this problem, a decades-old or more problem of ER closures, only acted on the eve of an election in the minister's backyard. We committed and will continue to commit to addressing these problems for all Nova Scotians and from a system perspective and not political one-offs. Presently, our minister is working and taking action as we committed to during the election. Dr. Ross is already on the job, Mr. Speaker. He is aware of the challenges in the Capital District Health, and he has met with the Deputy Minister already on potential interim and short-term actions to relieve the pressures of our ERs across this province. New bids have been added, Mr. Speaker. Dr. Ross also has a work plan which will see him visiting facilities and staff in DHAs across the province and reporting back his advice to the Deputy Minister. This will inform future short-term actions, Mr. Speaker. DHAs have been told they have more flexibility in their funding arrangements to find locums. But we know on this side of the House, and our Minister of Health is very much aware that chronic and systematic problems this long in the making won't be addressed overnight, and certainly not within a few short months of governing on this side of the House. We need to be realistic. We need to look at the fact that these problems in ERs, again, are decades old. They cannot be solved in a few short months. There are a lot of issues that have resulted over the years in terms of ER closures, and it's just not finding that simple one cure-all solution. Unlike the opposition, we will not tell Nova Scotians that there is a magic wand to solve these problems. There is no magic wand. What we told Nova Scotians in the election and now is the truth. It is a big, complex, long-standing problem that has been neglected for far too long. But we also told Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker, that we had a plan. And that's what we are implementing. And that's what our Minister of Health has been working on for the past 4 to 5 months since we have taken this side of the House. It began with Dr. Ross yesterday. The minister introduced a bill, Bill 52, that was passed today in this House, that would strengthen the reporting and accountability relationships, Mr. Speaker, and that's a good thing. That is a responsible move to a long-standing problem that will help to start finding resolution to ER closures in this province. In and of itself, it won't fix the problem. We realize that. And the minister realizes that that alone will not fix the problem to ER closures in this province. But it is an important piece of the puzzle and the complex puzzle of ER closures. We said as a government that we would be accountable to Nova Scotians, and this will help do that. And that's what we committed to in the election. In the coming months, we will implement additional measures, including recommended actions by Dr. Ross, but also additional beds where needed and an emergency department protection fund. And Mr. Speaker, that is another responsible action and responsible solution to a possible resolution to ER closures across this province. We also know that addressing this problem requires doctors and nurses, and actions like this will help recruit and retain those good doctors and nurses for this province, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, our Minister of Health has been giving due diligence to the problems of ER closures in this province, and our minister is committed to finding the most reasonable and the most responsible solutions that in the end and over the next few years will certainly see positive results to some of the crises we see in emergency departments all across this province. And we shall not forget that this is just not overnight solutions that are going to help solve this crisis, Mr. Speaker. This is about good planning, good governance, accountability by this government and by this Minister of Health for this government, and we will ensure that we are accountable to the people of Nova Scotia and the commitments this government made during that election. We will commit, Mr. Speaker, to working with all stakeholders in finding these solutions. And I admire and feel quite confident in our Minister of Health in this government, who has been acting as quickly as possible, given the few short months that we have been on this side of the House, to move forward with positive action on a long-standing crisis in this province over the past decade or more, Mr. Speaker. And I feel quite confident standing in my place on behalf of this government and discussing this very important issue. We, as representatives on this side of the House, and I know all members of this House, are very concerned about the growing problems within our healthcare system. But I can tell you, this government and this Minister of Health, our Minister of Health, is committed to finding those resolutions to the problems we are faced within healthcare today. One of them, and a very important one of them, the one we're debating here tonight, is the problem of ER closures all across this province. Each and every one of our communities that have a hospital that has faced closures, we know the impact that it has on our community members. We know the difficulty that it is for staff and doctors to manage those closures, to be able to deliver the care in their communities that they have trained for, that they are committed to providing that good health care. But we also know, Mr. Speaker, that this government and this Minister of Health on this side of the House has been working diligently at finding those solutions. And I trust that the members on the other side of the House, given time, will recognize that this government is committed, that this government has been working diligently, and that they'll also recognize that this is just not an easy crisis to fix. It can't be fixed in 4 months. And they know that. We know that. So obviously the good members on the other side of the House also recognize that these long-standing problems of closures in our communities across this province cannot possibly be fixed in a few short months. So we on this side of the House have trust and faith in our government, in our Minister of Health, giving good accountability, coming up with productive solutions, Mr. Speaker, that eventually, over the next couple of years, we will see some positive results in the crises that we are facing today in our emergency rooms. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to be this serious topic.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes the honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased today to rise to speak to the topic of emergency room closures, although I'm not pleased that we are forced to be discussing this still, because really, from day one, the NDP has approached governing from the same perspective as the last government did. It's good enough. It's good enough. And the member opposite discussed a magic wand. There's no magic wand. In fact, I would say that the magic wand was the NDP campaign document, because they were so sure that this was some sort of magic panacea that was going to improve everything. And if we look at the campaign document, they said you just can't count on Rodney MacDonald's Conservatives when it comes to health care. If anything, waits have gotten worse. Guess what?
Did it use complex?
In the last 5 months, if anything, ER closures have gotten worse. And point 2 goes on to say each step in the NDP plan means more Nova Scotians can receive care when they need it, rather than waiting as their health gets worse. Well, I would suggest to you, Mr. Speaker, that if we are in fact waiting because our local ER is closed, then in fact our health is getting worse. In fact, since this government came to office, we have seen more than 4,000 hours of closures since June the 10th, the day this government took power. This equates to more than 166 days. They have had 5 months to make improvements. And they kept talking all through the election about this plan, the plan to fix ERs, the plan to fix ERs. And in fact, what we discovered upon arriving here in the House is that there was no plan. The plan was to hire a part-time physician or a physician to come in part-time and come up with a plan. There was no plan. And over again, on a variety of issues, what we hear from this government is, it's good enough. It's what the last bunch did. Then I guess that's good enough for Nova Scotians, and it's not good enough. It's high time this government stop blaming others and start governing. They were elected by the people of Nova Scotia to point to solutions, not to point fingers. And speaking of points, emergency rooms have become the first point of access to our healthcare system. They have become the places where people in communities go to access primary care. They now function as doctors' offices. And why is this happening? Well, we have doctors going off and doing locums in Ontario. And they're doing that because they, A, know in advance when they're going to be needed, B, they can make a lot more money going there. That problem could be solved with some planning and a little bit of money. But do we see that? No, we do not. Multiple hospitals and facilities in adjoining communities are facing closures on the same day. And that has a cascading effect on our regional hospitals, and it puts tremendous pressure on them as well. The one thing we've seen in this last little while is that the government has appointed a very learned person to be our ER advisor. But what we need to see now is the plan that the NDP supposedly had when they promised to keep emergency rooms open. There is no plan. This NDP government has not been able to effectively produce a plan for emergency rooms, for caregivers, for nurse practitioners, for community clinics, or for H1N1. While other provinces were coming up with effective strategies to deal with these issues, our Minister of Health was standing there and pointing over at these guys, telling them it was their fault.
Use gods.
And while other provinces are executing their strategies to combat H1N1, the Minister of Health is telling toddlers to cough up their sleeves. Good luck with that. While Nova Scotians are facing frustrating lineups and overcrowding while waiting to get vaccinated for H1N1, in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, over the past week, 23 staffers at a local call centre have been working 12 hours a day booking appointments, 3,500 appointments a day. And I have an article here I'd like to table. Because these appointments are being booked ahead, they're ahead of time, before the appointments actually start. There's no big rush at the door. There's no big cluster standing outside in the cold, in the rain, in the wet. People who have diabetes aren't keeling over because they haven't had their meals.
You mean they're organized?
Well, yeah, they're organized. It's an efficient use of everyone's time and resources. Now, it's not like Nova Scotia doesn't have the human resources to run call centres. All we have to do is ask the Minister of Economic and Rural Development, and he'll tell you about the vast number of call centre employees that are facing unemployment in all parts of the province. Mr. Speaker, what Nova Scotia is lacking right now is leadership, the type of leadership that's creative enough to think outside the box, the type of leadership that demands that the "it's good enough" approach is not good enough for Nova Scotians. Now, this Minister of Health seems to be perfectly fine with a lack of clinics in Bedford, in Hammonds Plains, and in Clayton Park. These are the fastest growing communities in HRM. And let's take a look at where those clinics are. Well, we look for the next week, and there is no clinic in Bedford, in Clayton Park, in Hammonds Plains. We look for the following week, and you know what? There is no clinic in Bedford, there is no clinic in Clayton Park, there is no clinic in Hammonds Plains. Then we look for November 16th to the 22nd, and guess what? There is no clinic in Bedford, there is no clinic in Clayton Park, there is no clinic in Hammonds Plains. And then we look at November 23rd to the 29th, a full month after the clinics start, and guess what? There is no clinic in Bedford, there is no clinic in Clayton Park, there is no clinic in Hammonds Plains. Now, yesterday I spoke in the House about the case of a family who have 4 children below the age of 3. They are supposed to be among the priorities. So this family packed up, went out to Enfield to the clinic, and they got there at 9 o'clock in the morning, and they stood outside in the cold, the triplets and the other child and the mom and the dad, and they waited for 3 hours. And the only people who were being plucked out of that line as priorities were pregnant women. And the father said, geez, I have no problem with pregnant women going ahead. I understand that's a very real health risk here. But he did object to the fact that he had 4 small children below the age of 3. And they were not asked to proceed up the line. After 3 hours, there were still 100 people ahead of them in the line. And their children were tired and cold and hungry, and so they took them home. Now, one of the excuses I'm hearing is that they couldn't do a clinic in Bedford because you can't just do a clinic one day, you have to do it for multiple days in a row. But I find it interesting that we got an email in our government emails today saying that there will be clinics held on November 5th and November 10th at the World Trade and Convention Centre for government workers. So those are 2 clinics 5 days apart. And if we can do it for government workers, how come we can't do it for people in Bedford, in Clayton Park, and in Hammonds Plains? I don't understand that. It seems to me that children below the age of 3 are probably a little more important than we government workers. And this is just typical of what we are seeing from this government. There is no plan, it's half a plan, or it's not thought out. I have heard that once you get inside, it's very professional, and that's wonderful, but there's a big knot when you get inside because people have to fill out the forms. Why wouldn't we just put the form up online so people could download it and fill it in earlier? That's what they're doing in New Brunswick. It's much easier if people can get that done ahead of time. They don't have to fish through their bags trying to find their health number and all that kind of thing. I don't understand why this wasn't thought through better. Thank you.
Thank you. The time has expired for debate on the motion of interruption debate for this evening. Want to thank the honourable members for having taken part in tonight's late debate. The motion to adjourn was made earlier, and the House stands adjourned until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. Thank you.